Yeah, look, I think this is much more than an insider's argument because, as you know, I've been around Parliament for a long while, including sitting in on both sides of the chamber in the advisor's box, and I've never seen one as clear-cut as this before. The Prime Minister was reading out a transcript, a quote from the Director-General of ASIO, and the bit he left out made it sound like all the applicants were being referred to ASIO. The bit that he left out makes clear that that's not the case. It's only when criteria are hit that the applicants are referred to ASIO. I mean, he really has to apologise and correct the record, doesn't he? Or it makes a joke of the actual parliamentary rules.
It does. It makes a joke of his own standards, his own code of practice, which he is meant to apply to ministers. If he won't apply it to himself, it makes a complete joke of the parliament, and it means anyone can do or say anything, including selectively use quotes, take out relevant parts and say that is fine. I mean, we haven't seen the like of this. You could understand it if it was a misquote of someone who was president of a community organisation. This is deliberately misquoting the Director-General of ASIO, who the government puts in charge of our national security. So for the Prime Minister to try and bat this way or dismiss it shows that he doesn't take his number one priority of keeping the Australian community safe. I've never seen the like of this. And the worst thing is he had the opportunity almost immediately after Peter Dutton raised it with him to correct the record. Yet he failed to do that. He failed to come back into the parliament after question time to correct the record. And as you've pointed out, and as the clip showed that previously, he was reading it. He can't say he was paraphrasing the Director-General of ASIO because he was reading the quote. And the extraordinary thing is there's actually two incidences in that insider's interview where Mike Burgess, the Director-General of ASIO, makes it clear that not all of those who are coming from the Gaza war zone were being checked by ASIO. There are two incidents in that, and yet he has tried to gloss over that through misquoting him from that insider's interview.
Yeah, that's been obvious.
Nothing less than a disgrace.
That's been obvious to anyone who's been watching. We've been saying on this program all week that not all the applicants were being referred to ASIO. Now, the path forward here is that the compromise that you would accept if there was a guarantee from the government that every applicant at least had some face-to-face contact with ASIO, some sort of security interview with ASIO? Would that mean that you would be happy for this migration to continue?
Well, the first thing we want to see is the government admit that it got it wrong, that it's taken the unprecedented step of allowing people to come from the Gaza war zone on tourist visas. Now, that has never happened in Australia's history. From a terrorist-controlled territory that we've taken people on visas which are tourist visas. So they have to admit they got it wrong. And the Prime Minister and the new Immigration Minister should be able to admit that because it was the previous Immigration Minister who did that. Now, we know that he was hapless in everything he handled. So they should just be able to admit we got it wrong and we're going to make sure that all those who are currently here will get those types of checks so that they will get those in-person interviews, that biometric testing will be done, that they will liaise with allies to make sure that there's nothing that they have on these individuals which might point to them being a risk to security here in Australia. And also the interviews asking them what their views are on Hamas. That is the first step that should be taken. And then the Prime Minister should come straight and clean with the Australian people and say that has all been done. That is what the Prime Minister and the Immigration Minister need to do, and that is what we will continue to be asking them to do.
Just very briefly, Dan, you've seen it so many times, but the claims of racism and divisiveness and xenophobia directed at Peter Dutton, do you just brush that off, or does that need to be countered?
Well, obviously, we've got to call it out and say that this is just not true, and people are just throwing words around to distract from the points that we are making, points that go to a government's number one duty to keep the Australian people safe. What we're seeing here is completely unprecedented, and it's about protecting our nation. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from the Gaza war zone or whether it's coming from Syria when parts of it were controlled by ISIS, or when parts of Iraq were controlled by IS. What any government needs to do, no matter where it's occurring, is make sure that the people are coming here get the relevant and appropriate security checks.
Now, I don't think that's hard for Australians to understand.
That's happened.
Yeah, obviously it hasn't been happening. It's got to be beefed up, but they're going to have to admit error to do that. So it's going to be difficult in coming days. We shall see.